Where did you hear that song? The question cut through the quiet restaurant like cold winter air, low and controlled, yet heavy enough to make every sound in the room disappear. Emily Carter froze beside table 14, her fingers tightening slightly around the coffee pot as the soft melody died on her lips. The late-night crowd inside Whitmore Grill barely noticed her most evenings. That was part of the job. Move quietly. Smile softly. Refill cups before anyone asked. But now every eye near the marble bar had shifted toward the man standing near the front entrance in a charcoal overcoat dusted with snow. Ryan Whitmore, billionaire, hotel empire owner. The kind of man whose name appeared on skyscrapers, hospitals, and magazine covers. He wasn't supposed to be there that night. Men like him didn't walk into small Manhattan restaurants during snowstorms unless something had gone wrong. Outside, freezing rain tapped against the windows while yellow taxi lights blurred through the storm like fading stars. Ryan stared at Emily with an expression that didn't belong on someone like him. Not anger, not curiosity, something deeper, something unsettled. I asked you a question, he said again, quieter this time. Emily swallowed carefully. I'm sorry, sir. Ryan stepped closer. The expensive leather gloves in his hand creaked softly as he tightened his grip. That song you were humming. His gray eyes narrowed slightly. Where did you hear it? Emily looked down for a second, embarrassed now that the attention had shifted toward her. I don't know, she admitted softly. My mother used to hum it when I was little. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that made people stop pretending to scroll through their phones. Ryan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. For a moment, he looked as though someone had reached into the past and pulled out something he had spent years trying to bury. Then his billionaire mask returned. Calm, controlled, distant. Interesting, he said flatly. Emily nodded politely, unsure what else to say. Would you like another coffee, Mr. Whitmore? Most people used his title carefully, respectfully, nervously. Emily said it naturally, without fear or admiration. Ryan noticed that immediately. Black coffee, he replied. No sugar. Of course. She moved toward the counter again, her white sneakers nearly silent against the polished floor. Ryan watched her the entire way. There was nothing dramatic about Emily Carter. No designer clothes. No perfect makeup. Just a simple black waitress uniform, pale blonde hair tied low behind her neck, and tired blue eyes that looked older than 26. But there was something strangely calm about her. Something untouched by the noise of the city around her. You okay, boss? His driver asked quietly from behind him. Ryan didn't answer immediately. His attention remained fixed on Emily as she poured coffee beneath the warm amber glow of the hanging lights. Then he finally spoke. That song, he murmured. It's impossible. 15 years earlier, his younger brother Daniel had written that melody during treatment at St. Vincent Children's Hospital. Just a simple piano sequence. Soft. Fragile. Daniel had never recorded it professionally. Never published it. Ryan himself hadn't heard it since the week before the funeral. Yet somehow a waitress in Manhattan was humming it perfectly while wiping down tables after midnight. Emily returned with the coffee and placed it gently in front of him. Careful, she said softly. The mug's really hot. Ryan looked at her hand for a second. No expensive jewelry. No polished nails. Just small faint scars near her fingertips, like someone who worked constantly without complaining about it. What's your name? He asked. Emily. Last name. Carter. Ryan nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. You always hum songs while you work. Emily gave a small, awkward smile. Only when it's quiet. And that particular song? She shrugged lightly. I guess it just stayed with me. Ryan stared down into the black coffee. The steam curled upward between them like a ghost neither of them understood yet. Somewhere near the kitchen, dishes clinked softly. A tired jazz song played through old ceiling speakers. Outside, snow thickened across Park Avenue. Emily noticed his untouched coat sleeve dampened by melting ice. There's a storm warning tonight, she said gently. Roads uptown are already freezing. Ryan looked back at her. Are you always this concerned about strangers? Only the ones standing in blizzards without gloves on. For the first time that evening, something almost resembling a smile touched the corner of his mouth. Small, brief, gone again in seconds. But Emily noticed it. So did the bartender across the room, who nearly dropped a glass in shock. Ryan Whitmore didn't smile. Not in public. Not anymore. Emily glanced toward the clock near the register. 11:47 p.m. Almost closing time. You should probably head home before the roads get worse, she said quietly. New York drivers lose their minds in weather like this. Ryan leaned back slightly, studying her face again. Not flirtatiously, not casually, like a man trying to solve something impossible. And what about you? He asked. You heading home after this? Emily hesitated for half a second too long. Eventually, Ryan noticed the pause. Men like him built billion-dollar companies by noticing pauses. Long night? He asked. Emily forced a small smile. Rent week. That explained enough. Ryan reached for his wallet slowly, pulling out a black card that probably held more spending power than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. Emily glanced at it without reaction. Another thing he noticed immediately. Most people stared at wealth. Emily looked tired instead. Keep the kitchen open another 30 minutes, Ryan said calmly. I'll pay whatever it costs. Emily blinked softly. Sir, we're already closing. Please. The words sounded unfamiliar coming from him. Almost rusty. Emily looked surprised by the tone more than the request itself. Then she nodded once. Okay. Ryan watched her disappear toward the kitchen doors while snow continued falling outside the windows. And for the first time in 15 years, the melody his brother had written no longer sounded like grief. It sounded like someone quietly keeping it alive. The storm grew heavier after midnight. Snow pressed against the restaurant windows in thick, white waves while the city outside slowly disappeared beneath ice and silence. Inside Whitmore Grill, only 3 customers remained. A tired couple near the back booth, an elderly man finishing soup beside the window, and Ryan Whitmore, still sitting alone at table 14 with untouched black coffee growing cold between his hands. Emily noticed it while stacking clean plates near the counter. Most wealthy customers rush through places like this without remembering the waitress who served them. Ryan was different tonight. Quiet, distracted, like part of him was somewhere far away. You should probably heat that up, she said gently as she passed his table again. Ryan looked down at the mug as if surprised it was there at all. I forgot about it. Emily reached for the cup. I will bring a fresh one. Emily. She paused softly at the sound of her name. Yes. Ryan hesitated for a second before speaking. Did your mother teach music? Emily blinked. The question caught her off guard. A little, she answered carefully. Mostly piano lessons for kids. Ryan nodded slowly. Professionally? Not really. Community programs mostly. Emily carried the cold coffee back toward the kitchen, but she could still feel his eyes following her. There was something strange about the way he listened whenever she spoke about music. Not curiosity exactly. More like grief searching for an address. A few minutes later, she returned with another mug. Fresh steam curled upward beneath the soft amber lights hanging above the table. Thank you, Ryan said quietly. Emily gave a small nod. You are welcome. He studied her for another long moment. Do you play piano too? Emily smiled faintly this time. Real smile. Small but warm. Not very well. That usually means yes. She looked down briefly. My mother made me practice every Sunday morning. Classical. Mostly. Ryan leaned back slightly in his chair. And the song from earlier? Emily's expression softened immediately, almost unconsciously. That one was her favorite. Ryan felt something heavy settle inside his chest again. 15 years. 15 years since he had heard Daniel play that melody beside a hospital window while snow fell outside, almost exactly like tonight. Back then, Ryan had been too busy building meetings and acquisitions and investor dinners to sit beside his younger brother long enough to understand what mattered to him. By the time he finally slowed down, there had been no time left. What was your mother's name? He asked carefully. Emily adjusted the sleeve of her black uniform before answering. Olivia Carter. Ryan's fingers tightened around the coffee mug. The name meant nothing to him immediately, but something about it still felt familiar. Like hearing a word half remembered from a dream. Emily glanced toward the kitchen clock. Almost 12:30 a.m. now. Her manager was already counting receipts near the register with tired eyes and an old calculator that clicked loudly in the quiet restaurant. You really should head home soon, she said softly. The bridges might close if the ice gets worse. Ryan almost smiled again. You keep worrying about me. You are still standing in a snowstorm without gloves. I own 3 penthouses in Manhattan. Emily shrugged lightly. Cold weather does not care about penthouses. That earned a quiet laugh from him. Low. Genuine. The bartender nearly looked ready to call someone because Ryan Whitmore almost never laughed in public either. Emily noticed the reaction around the room and looked confused. What? Ryan shook his head once. Nothing. Silence settled comfortably between them after that. Not awkward silence. Calm silence. The kind rarely found in New York City. Emily returned to wiping menus near the counter while Ryan watched snow bury the sidewalks outside. Somewhere in the kitchen, an old radio began playing soft piano jazz. Warm notes drifted through the nearly empty restaurant like candlelight. Then Ryan heard it again. Very faint this time. Emily humming under her breath while she worked. Same melody. Same gentle rhythm. He closed his eyes for a second. Daniel used to hum exactly like that whenever he became nervous before treatments. Quietly. Absent-mindedly. Like music helped him carry fear without speaking about it. Ryan suddenly stood from the table. The movement startled Emily slightly. Is everything okay? She asked. Ryan reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a silver business card. Thick. Minimal. Expensive. Do you still teach music anywhere? Emily looked surprised. Sometimes at the community center downtown. What community center? Madison Arts House. Ryan's expression changed immediately. The one on East 47th? Yes. That building is being shut down next month. Emily's smile faded slightly. I know. Ryan studied her carefully now. And you still volunteer there? Those kids do not really have anywhere else to go. You are not paid. Emily shook her head once. Not everything needs to be. Ryan stared at her for several seconds without speaking. Most people around him measured time in profit margins and percentages. Emily Carter talked about helping strangers like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Finally, he placed the silver card gently on the counter between them. Call this number tomorrow morning. Emily glanced down at the card but did not touch it yet. Why? Because I may be interested in helping your community center. Her eyes widened slightly. Seriously? I have not promised anything. His tone returned calmer now. Controlled again. But I would like to hear more before the building disappears. Emily looked genuinely hopeful for the first time all night. Not excited because of money. Not impressed by his status. Just hopeful. Ryan noticed the difference immediately. Thank you, she said softly. Ryan nodded once and pulled on his coat. Outside, snow continued falling beneath the streetlights in slow silver waves. He stopped beside the entrance before leaving. Emily. Yes. Next time you hum that song. She looked up at him quietly. Ryan's voice lowered slightly. Do not stop halfway through. Then he stepped into the storm, disappearing into the white Manhattan night, while Emily stood motionless beside the counter, staring down at the silver card in her hands and wondering why the loneliest man she had ever met suddenly looked afraid of forgetting a song. Emily barely slept after that night. The silver business card remained on the small wooden table beside her motel bed, while snowlight flickered through thin curtains that did little to block the freezing Manhattan dawn. Room 214 smelled faintly of old coffee and radiator heat. Her coat hung near the door beside a canvas tote bag filled with sheet music and unpaid bills. The room was small enough that 3 steps carried her from the bed to the kitchenette. But it was quiet. Quiet enough for memories to grow loud. Emily sat cross-legged near the window with a cup of instant coffee warming her hands. Outside, plows pushed through thick snow while people hurried along icy sidewalks beneath gray skies. Somewhere downtown, the city was waking up, but her mind remained inside Whitmore Grill. Inside that strange moment when Ryan Whitmore looked at her like a ghost had spoken to him through music. She picked up the silver card again. Simple lettering. No unnecessary design. Just a name and private number. Ryan Whitmore. She almost laughed softly to herself. Men like him did not hand out private numbers to waitresses from late-night diners. Her phone buzzed suddenly across the table, startling her from the thought. Please tell me you are awake, came the voice on the other in the moment she answered. Sophie Langley sounded exhausted already. Barely, Emily admitted. You sound terrible. Thank you. That is exactly what every woman wants to hear at 7:30 in the morning. Emily smiled faintly. Sophie had been her closest friend since community college. Loud where Emily was quiet. Fearless where Emily hesitated. They balanced each other somehow. What happened? Sophie asked immediately. You texted me at 1 in the morning saying a billionaire gave you his personal number. Then you disappeared. Emily leaned her head gently against the cold window glass. I do not even know how to explain it. Start with whether he was handsome. Sophie. That means yes. Emily closed her eyes briefly. It was not like that. Then what was it like? Silence lingered for a second before Emily answered quietly. Sad. Sophie stopped joking immediately. Sad. He looked like someone carrying something heavy for a very long time. Outside, a siren echoed faintly through the snow-covered streets. Emily stared down at the silver cardigan. And every time I hummed that song, she hesitated. It was like he forgot how to breathe. By noon, the snowstorm had softened into freezing rain. Emily arrived at Madison Art's house, carrying 2 grocery bags filled with donated crayons and paper cups for the children's music class. The old brick building stood squeezed between a laundromat and a boarded-up bookstore on East 47th Street. Faded blue paint peeled near the entrance steps. One of the letters from the sign above had burned out months ago, but every Saturday morning, children still ran through those doors smiling like they were entering Carnegie Hall. Emily pushed inside, immediately greeted by warm air and distant piano notes echoing through the hallway. Miss Emily, a small boy with missing front teeth, nearly collided into her while holding a violin case twice his size. Easy there, Mason, she laughed softly. You are going to break your instrument before class even starts. Miss Gloria says if I practice enough, I can play at Lincoln Center someday. Emily smiled. Then you better practice. The little boy grinned proudly before running down the hallway again. Emily watched him disappear around the corner, her expression softening. This place mattered. Not because of money. Because for some children, it was the only warm thing in their week. You are late, Gloria Bennett called gently from inside the piano room. Emily stepped through the doorway and immediately relaxed. Gloria sat beside the old, upright piano wearing her usual wool cardigan and silver reading glasses balanced near the tip of her nose. At 68, she still carried herself with quiet elegance despite the exhaustion hidden beneath her eyes lately. Snowstorm, Emily explained. Gloria nodded knowingly. New York survives everything except weather. Emily laughed softly and began arranging sheet music across the piano bench. How many students today? 23. Gloria sighed lightly. Maybe 24 if little Ava convinces her grandmother to let her walk here in the rain. Emily noticed unopened envelopes stacked beside the piano. Past due notices. Utility warnings. Final reminders. Her smile faded slightly. Gloria caught the expression immediately. Do not look at those. You have not paid the heating bill yet. Gloria adjusted her glasses carefully. We will figure something out. Emily reached into her coat pocket slowly. Actually, Gloria raised an eyebrow as Emily placed the silver business card on the piano. The older woman stared at the name for a long moment before looking back up. Ryan Whitmore? I met him last night. You met Manhattan's most emotionally unavailable billionaire at a diner during a snowstorm. Emily blinked. That is strangely specific. Honey, every woman over 40 in New York knows Ryan Whitmore. Gloria picked up the card carefully. What did he want? Emily looked toward the old piano near the corner of the room. Its ivory keys were chipped with age, but someone had polished the wood recently anyway. He heard me humming my mother's song. Gloria's expression changed instantly. Small, barely visible, but enough for Emily to notice. What? Emily asked quietly. Gloria looked down at the card again. Nothing. You know something. The older woman hesitated. Your mother used to volunteer at St. Vincent Children's Hospital years ago. Emily nodded slowly. I remember. There was a young piano player there. Gloria's voice softened with memory. Very talented boy. Fragile health. Your mother adored him. Emily felt her heartbeat slow slightly. What was his name? Gloria looked directly at her now. Daniel Whitmore. Silence filled the room completely. Somewhere outside the practice hall, children laughed while violin strings squeaked through scales. But inside the piano room, Emily suddenly understood why Ryan Whitmore looked at her like someone staring into the past. Emily stood motionless beside the old piano while snowmelt tapped softly against the windows of Madison Art's house. Daniel Whitmore. The name lingered in the room like unfinished music. Gloria lowered herself carefully onto the piano bench and folded the silver business card between her fingers. Your mother never talked much about those hospital years, she said quietly. But she cared deeply about that boy. Emily slowly sat beside the stack of sheet music near the piano. Why did she never tell me his last name? Gloria gave a faint, sad smile. Because your mother believed kindness should stay quiet. Children's voices echoed somewhere down the hallway. A trumpet played the wrong note. Someone laughed immediately afterward. Life continued around them. unaware that 15-year-old memories had suddenly returned from the dead. Emily stared at the faded piano keys. Ryan looked at me like he recognized a ghost. Gloria nodded slowly. Maybe he did. Before Emily could answer, the front entrance downstairs opened loudly against the wind. Heavy footsteps crossed the hallway floor. Then silence followed. Strange silence. The kind adults made when someone important walked into a room. Gloria glanced toward the doorway first. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Emily turned. Ryan Whitmore stood near the entrance of the piano room in a dark wool coat, still dusted with snow. No assistants. No security. Just him. The children in the hallway whispered immediately after recognizing his face from television interviews and magazine covers. Ryan barely noticed them. His attention fixed entirely on the old, upright piano near the corner. Then slowly on Emily. "You came," she said softly, surprised despite herself. Ryan stepped inside the room carefully, almost respectfully. "You said this place mattered." His eyes moved across peeling paint, cracked ceiling corners, folding chairs held together with tape. Nothing about Madison Arts House looked impressive. Yet the room still carried warmth expensive buildings often lacked. "Mr. Whitmore." Gloria greeted politely while standing. Ryan looked at her for a second. Recognition flickered faintly across his face. "You knew my brother." It was not a question. Gloria nodded once. "Daniel played piano here sometimes before treatments." Ryan's jaw tightened slightly at the name. Even now, hearing it aloud still sounded painful for him. Emily noticed immediately. Ryan walked slowly toward the old, upright piano. His fingertips brushed gently across the worn wooden edge. "This is the same one," he murmured. Gloria looked surprised. "You remember?" Daniel used to complain about the middle C key sticking. Ryan pressed the key softly. The faint, uneven sound filled the room. His expression shifted instantly. Smaller somehow. Younger. For a moment, he no longer looked like Manhattan's most intimidating billionaire. He looked like an exhausted older brother, standing inside a memory he never expected to revisit. Emily watched him quietly. "You used to come here with him?" Ryan shook his head once. "Not enough." The honesty in his voice surprised even him. Silence settled again. Warm silence this time. Snowlight spilled through the windows while children's music drifted faintly from another classroom. Ryan finally looked toward Gloria. "You knew Olivia Carter well." Gloria smiled softly. "Your brother adored her." Ryan lowered his gaze slightly. "She used to bring him hot chocolate after chemo appointments." Emily blinked. "You remember that?" Daniel talked about it constantly. Ryan gave a quiet breath that almost sounded like laughter. "He once told me her hot chocolate tasted better than hospital food because kindness changes flavor." Gloria covered her mouth briefly, emotional now. Emily looked down at her hands. Her mother had passed away 3 years earlier from heart complications. Some days the grief felt manageable. Other days it still arrived like winter air under a locked door. Hearing strangers remember her kindness made something ache gently inside her chest. Ryan noticed the silence in Emily immediately. "I am sorry about your mother," he said quietly. Emily looked up, surprised by the softness in his tone. "Thank you." Ryan hesitated before speaking again. Daniel died 6 months after meeting her. The room became still. Even the hallway outside seemed quieter somehow. After the funeral, Ryan continued slowly, "I stopped coming here." His gray eyes moved across the old building again. "I stopped listening to music completely." Emily could see it now. Not arrogance. Not coldness. Grief. Carefully folded into expensive suits and business meetings for 15 years. "And then you heard the song again," she said softly. Ryan looked directly at her. "And suddenly it felt like my brother was still somewhere in the room." Neither of them spoke after that. The old piano sat quietly between them while snow continued falling beyond the windows. Finally, Gloria cleared her throat gently. "The building owner wants us out in 3 weeks." Ryan nodded once. Business expression returning slightly now. "I reviewed the financial reports this morning." Emily blinked. "Already?" "I could not sleep." He reached into his coat pocket and removed a folder. Clean. Precise. Organized. Emily stared nervously while Ryan placed it carefully atop the piano. "This building needs approximately $1.8 million in repairs and operational funding over the next 5 years. Gloria nearly sat down again from shock. Ryan continued calmly. "The original investors withdrew support after the pandemic." Emily looked at him carefully. "And Ryan's eyes moved slowly toward the children laughing in the hallway outside the room, then back to the faded piano, then finally to Emily. And I think my brother would have hated the idea of this place disappearing. Gloria covered her eyes briefly, emotional now. Emily said nothing. Ryan opened the folder and slid a single document toward them across the piano keys. Whitmore Foundation is prepared to purchase the building immediately. Emily's breath caught softly. Ryan looked at her then, not like a billionaire making a transaction, like someone finally trying to keep an old promise alive. On one condition, he said quietly. Emily frowned slightly. What condition? Ryan's voice lowered almost to a whisper. Do not let the music stop again. The news spread through Madison Art's house before Ryan Whitmore even left the building. Children whispered excitedly in hallways too narrow for their energy, while teachers exchanged stunned looks over paper coffee cups and worn sheet music. By late afternoon, someone had already searched his net worth online and accidentally announced it loud enough for half the piano class to hear. $42 billion. Mason whispered like he was describing a superhero instead of a businessman. Emily stood near the front desk pretending to organize registration forms while secretly trying to process everything herself. One condition: do not let the music stop again. The sentence still echoed in her mind hours later. Ryan had not sounded like a billionaire making a donation. He had sounded like a grieving brother asking for forgiveness from someone no longer alive to hear it. Across the room, Gloria carefully reread the proposal documents with trembling hands. This is real, she whispered almost to herself. Emily sat beside her slowly. You thought he would change his mind? Gloria adjusted her glasses. Men with that much money usually see places like this as tax write-offs. Emily glanced toward the old piano. He did not look at this place like a business. No. Gloria smiled faintly. He looked at it like a memory. Outside, freezing rain had replaced the snowstorm completely now. Water streaked across the windows while gray Manhattan traffic crawled through slush-covered streets below. Emily checked the clock near the hallway entrance. 4:30 p.m. She needed to leave soon for her shift at Whitmore Grill. The irony still felt strange. Ryan Whitmore owned half the luxury hotels in New York City, yet somehow the most meaningful conversation she had ever had with him happened inside a rundown arts building beside a broken piano. Emily. She turned at the sound of Gloria's voice. There is something else you should know. Emily paused. Gloria hesitated briefly before continuing. Daniel Whitmore wrote more than one song here. Emily frowned slightly. What do you mean? Gloria carefully stood and crossed toward the old filing cabinet beside the piano room bookshelf. She unlocked the bottom drawer with a tiny silver key hanging from her necklace. Inside sat folders yellowed with age, recital flyers, faded photographs, and handwritten sheet music held together with rubber bands. Gloria pulled out a worn blue notebook and handed it gently to Emily. Your mother kept this after Daniel passed away. Emily opened the notebook carefully. The pages smelled faintly of dust and old paper. Musical notes covered nearly every sheet in messy handwritten pencil. Small comments lined the margins. Wrong chord here. Slower tempo. Olivia says this part sounds hopeful. Emily's throat tightened slightly. Daniel wrote all of this. Gloria nodded. Most of it during treatments. Emily turned another page and froze. Near the center of the notebook sat the melody she had hummed at the diner. Simple, delicate, familiar. But beneath the title someone had written a sentence in uneven handwriting. For Ryan. So he remembers happy things too. Emily stared silently at the page while rain tapped softly against the windows. Suddenly the melody no longer felt random. It felt intentional. A message surviving longer than the person who wrote it. Did Ryan ever hear this version? Emily asked quietly. Gloria shook her head once. After Daniel died, Ryan stopped visiting the hospital almost immediately. He handled the funeral arrangements, funded new research wings, gave interviews. Her voice softened sadly. But emotionally, he disappeared. Emily closed the notebook slowly. She understood that kind of grief more than most people realized. After her mother died, Emily had spent almost a year working double shifts just to avoid going home to silence. Sometimes pain became easier to survive when exhaustion drowned it out. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her coat pocket. Unknown number. Emily hesitated before answering. Hello. You forgot your scarf. Ryan's voice. Calm. Low. Instantly recognizable now. Emily blinked in surprise. What? Blue scarf. Piano room chair. Emily looked behind her immediately and realized he was right. Oh, a faint pause followed. Then Ryan spoke again. You should wear it tonight. Temperature is dropping below 20. Emily smiled despite herself. Are you always this concerned about strangers? Ryan gave the quietest hint of laughter through the phone. Only the ones humming impossible songs. Emily leaned lightly against the hallway wall. Thank you for today. Silence lingered briefly before he answered. You thanked me already. I know. She looked toward the music classrooms where children still practice scales despite leaking ceilings and flickering lights. But this place mattered to my mother too. Ryan's voice softened immediately. Then maybe I should have found it sooner. Emily did not know what to say to that. Outside, thunder rolled faintly somewhere over the Hudson River. Mr. Whitmore? She asked carefully. Ryan. Ryan. The name sounded unfamiliar, but strangely natural now. Why did you really come back today? Another pause. Longer this time. Because last night was the first time in 15 years that hearing music did not hurt. Emily closed her eyes briefly at the honesty in his voice. She could almost picture him standing somewhere alone in Manhattan while cold rain covered the city around him. Then maybe Daniel would be happy you came back, she said softly. Ryan did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded quieter than before. More human somehow. I'm not sure I deserve that yet. The line disconnected gently after that. No dramatic goodbye. Just silence. Emily lowered the phone slowly while rain continued tapping against the windows beside her. Then she looked down at the blue notebook still resting in her hands. For Ryan. So he remembers happy things too. Somewhere deep inside Manhattan, one lonely billionaire was finally starting to remember. By the following Thursday, Madison Art's house no longer smelled like dust and leaking radiators. It smelled like fresh paint, coffee, and possibility. Contractors moved through the hallways carrying lumber and electrical equipment while children watched in amazement from classroom doorways. Someone had fixed the flickering lights near the violin room. Someone else repaired the broken front steps that had nearly collapsed every winter for the past decade. And somehow, overnight, the old piano had been professionally restored. Emily stood frozen beside it that afternoon, running her fingertips softly across polished ivory keys that no longer stuck when pressed. I do not understand how he did all this so fast, Sophie whispered beside her while balancing two cardboard coffee trays. Emily smiled faintly. He owns half of Manhattan. Still, Sophie looked around the building in disbelief. Most rich people donate one giant check and disappear into interviews about generosity. She lowered her voice dramatically. Your billionaire is different. Emily immediately shook her head. He is not my billionaire. Sophie smirked. That was not a denial. Emily rolled her eyes softly and accepted one of the coffee cups. Across the hallway, children practiced scales on violins badly enough to sound almost painful, but nobody complained. Even the mistakes sounded hopeful now. Emily looked toward the front entrance again without meaning to. Ryan had not returned since the day he signed the foundation papers, but somehow his presence still lingered everywhere. In the repaired lights, in the new heaters, in the piano quietly glowing beneath warm afternoon sunlight. Miss Emily. Mason ran toward her with sheet music flying loosely in his hands. Look what they brought. Emily followed him into the small recital room and stopped immediately. New music stands. New chairs. New instruments still resting carefully inside unopened cases near the stage. Mason pointed excitedly toward a polished baby grand piano near the corner. That one came this morning. Emily stared silently. The old building suddenly looked less tired, less forgotten, as if someone had finally decided it deserved to survive. There you are. Gloria approached them carrying a folder pressed against her chest. Her cheeks were flushed from excitement and exhaustion. Ryan's assistant dropped this off an hour ago. Emily accepted the folder carefully. Inside sat finalized restoration schedules, financial statements, permit approvals, and a handwritten note attached to the top page. For the children first. The recital hall second. Music before appearances. Emily read the sentence twice quietly. Simple words, but somehow deeply personal. Gloria smiled softly while watching her reaction. Your mother used to say Daniel thought exactly like that. Emily looked up slowly. What do you mean? He hated expensive things unless they helped someone. Gloria adjusted her glasses. Once he sold a very expensive watch Ryan gave him because he wanted to buy instruments for another patient wing. Sophie blinked. He sold a luxury watch. Gloria nodded. Ryan was furious. Emily smiled faintly. What happened? Gloria laughed quietly for the first time all week. Daniel told him music mattered more than jewelry. The room softened with silence after that. Somewhere downstairs, a trumpet practiced warm-up notes badly enough to make Sophie wince dramatically. Emily looked back down at the handwritten note inside the folder. Music before appearances. The sentence sounded less like business strategy and more like something Ryan had spent years trying not to remember. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her apron pocket. Unknown number again. Emily stepped quietly into the hallway before answering. Hello. I have a question. Ryan's voice. Calm. Low. Familiar now. Emily leaned lightly against the wall beside the framed recital photographs. That usually means trouble. A soft breath of laughter answered her. Probably. She smiled before realizing she was smiling. What is the question? Would the children at the center like tickets to the New York Philharmonic this Saturday? Emily blinked. All of them. There are 32 seats available. Ryan, she stopped herself quietly. That is incredibly generous. Daniel loved the Philharmonic. His voice softened slightly at the name. I think he would have liked sharing it. Emily looked through the hallway window into the practice room, where Mason struggled seriously through beginner violin scales with complete determination despite sounding terrible. They would lose their minds, she admitted softly. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Good. Rain tapped gently against the building windows again, while distant traffic hummed below the streets outside. You sound tired, Emily said carefully. Another brief silence followed. Long meetings. Still working too much? Probably. Emily smiled faintly to herself. Some people hid grief with silence. Ryan hid his with work. Did you eat today? She asked absent-mindedly. Ryan sounded genuinely surprised. What? Emily blinked. Sorry. That sounded strange. No, his voice grew quieter somehow. It sounded nice. She looked down at the floor, suddenly embarrassed. My mother used to ask everyone that. Olivia Carter sounds like she took care of people naturally. Emily nodded softly, though he could not see it. Even when she was exhausted. Ryan did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something fragile beneath the calm. Daniel once told me she made the hospital feel less frightening. Emily closed her eyes briefly. Hearing strangers remember her mother's kindness still felt unreal sometimes. Like finding pieces of someone you thought the world had already forgotten. Ryan. Yes. Why did you really stop listening to music after he died? The silence this time lasted longer. Long enough that Emily thought maybe he would not answer at all. Then finally his voice returned. Softer than she had ever heard it before. Because every song reminded me that I failed him. Emily's heart tightened quietly. Outside the hallway windows, Manhattan blurred beneath gray rain and early evening lights. You were his brother, she said gently. Not a miracle. Ryan gave a tired breath on the other end of the line. That sounds exactly like something Olivia would have said. Emily smiled faintly. Then she was probably right. Neither of them spoke after that. But somehow the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt understood. And for the first time in years, somewhere above the noise of Manhattan and billion-dollar meetings and grief carefully hidden inside expensive suits, Ryan Whitmore realized someone was finally speaking to him like a human being instead of a headline. Saturday evening arrived wrapped in freezing wind and gold Manhattan lights. The children from Madison Arts House stood outside Lincoln Center wearing borrowed coats, crooked bow ties, and expressions too stunned to describe. Some of them had never ridden farther south than Midtown before. Others had never seen a live orchestra in their lives. Mason stared at the glowing entrance like someone looking at another planet. This place is bigger than my whole apartment building, he whispered. Emily smiled softly beside him while adjusting little Ava's scarf against the cold. The plaza fountain shimmered beneath winter lights while Blacktown cars lined the curb nearby. Elegant guests moved across the marble steps in long coats and polished shoes. But somehow the children from Madison Arts House still carried the brightest energy in the crowd. Gloria approached Emily quietly, her silver earrings catching the light. You did this. Emily shook her head immediately. No, Ryan did. Gloria smiled knowingly. Maybe, but he came back because of you. Emily looked away before answering. I just hummed a song. Sometimes that is enough. Before Emily could respond, The sound of excited whispers swept through the children near the entrance. Ryan Whitmore had arrived. He stepped from a black sedan, wearing a dark navy coat and charcoal scarf, snowflakes catching briefly in his dark hair before melting beneath the plaza lights. Cameras flashed immediately from somewhere across the street. A few people recognized him instantly. Billionaires were hard to hide in Manhattan, but Ryan barely acknowledged any of it. His attention moved directly toward the children gathered near the entrance, toward Emily standing quietly among them. For a moment, he simply watched her laugh softly while helping Ava zip her oversized winter coat. And something in his expression changed again. Softer now, less guarded. "Mr. Whitmore." Mason nearly sprinted toward him before remembering Gloria's repeated instructions about behaving respectfully around wealthy donors. Ryan looked down as the boy stopped awkwardly in front of him. "Thank you for the tickets, sir." Ryan's serious expression softened almost immediately. "You are welcome." Mason pointed toward the building excitedly. "Miss Emily says orchestras are like conversations without words." Ryan glanced toward Emily for a second. "She is right." Emily walked over then, snow crunching lightly beneath her boots. "You made it." Ryan looked at her quietly. "You sound surprised. I thought maybe work would steal you again." A faint smile touched his mouth. Tonight seemed more important. The words settled warmly between them while winter wind moved softly across the plaza. Ryan noticed the blue scarf wrapped around Emily's neck, the same one she forgot at Madison Arts House days earlier. Somehow seeing her where it felt strangely personal. "The children are excited," she said softly. "So am I." Ryan admitted it so honestly that Emily blinked slightly. For a second, he looked nothing like the intimidating businessman newspapers described. He looked like someone rediscovering a part of himself he thought was gone forever. Inside the concert hall, golden lights spilled across velvet seats and polished wood balconies. The children sat frozen with amazement while orchestra musicians tuned instruments beneath the chandelier glow. Emily took a seat near the center aisle beside Ava while Ryan remained standing quietly near the back of the row. He looked uncomfortable suddenly. "What is wrong?" Emily asked gently. Ryan loosened his tie slightly. "I have not been to a performance since Daniel died." Emily studied him carefully. "You can leave if you want." Ryan looked toward the orchestra stage where violinists prepared sheet music beneath warm lights. Then slowly he shook his head. "No," his voice lowered almost to a whisper. "I think I need to stay." The concert began moments later. Soft strings filled the hall first, then piano, then a rising swell of music so beautiful that even the restless children fell completely silent. Emily watched Ryan from the corner of her eye during the second movement. He sat perfectly still now, one hand pressed lightly against his mouth while his gaze remained fixed on the stage. Not detached, not distracted, emotional, deeply emotional. Somewhere halfway through the performance, the orchestra pianist began playing a delicate melody beneath the violins. Emily recognized it instantly. Not the exact same song Daniel had written, but close enough to carry the same ache. She glanced toward Ryan carefully. His eyes closed immediately at the first few notes. And for the first time since meeting him, Emily saw the grief he usually hid behind billion-dollar composure. Quiet grief. Exhausted grief. The kind people carry alone because they no longer know how to explain it. Beside Emily, little Ava slowly slipped her tiny hand into Emily's sleeve and whispered, "Why does Mr. Whitmore look sad?" Emily looked toward the stage lights reflecting softly across Ryan's face. "Because sometimes beautiful things remind people what they miss." Ava considered that seriously before nodding. Child understanding. Simple and honest. When the performance ended nearly 2 hours later, the audience rose in thunderous applause. The children from Madison Arts House clapped hardest of all. Mason looked ready to explode from happiness, while Gloria wiped tears quietly behind her glasses. Ryan remained seated for several extra seconds after everyone else stood. Emily touched his sleeve gently. "You okay?" Ryan opened his eyes slowly. They looked brighter now, vulnerable in a way powerful men rarely allowed themselves to appear. "Daniel loved this piece," he admitted softly. Emily smiled gently. "I think he still does." Ryan stared at her for a second after that, long enough that the noise of the crowd around them seemed to fade slightly. Then finally he gave the smallest real smile she had seen from him yet. Not polished, not public, human. "You know," he said quietly while people continued filing out around them. You are the first person in years who talks about him like he still belongs in the world. Emily looked toward the empty orchestra stage glowing beneath warm golden light. Maybe people are not truly gone if kindness keeps repeating their song. Ryan lowered his gaze briefly at those words. And somewhere beneath the applause fading through Lincoln Center, beneath years of grief hidden inside business meetings and empty penthouses, something inside him finally began to heal. The city felt quieter after the concert. Snow drifted slowly across Manhattan streets while yellow cabs reflected against wet pavement like moving gold beneath the midnight lights. Emily stood outside Lincoln Center helping the children into buses rented by the Whitmore Foundation while cold winter air curled around her scarf. Mason talked loudly about becoming a world-famous violinist someday. Ava refused to stop humming one of the orchestra melodies despite forgetting half the notes already. Gloria watched all of it with damp eyes and tired happiness resting softly across her face. Your mother would have loved tonight, she whispered beside Emily. Emily smiled gently while watching the children press excited faces against bus windows. I think she would have cried through the entire concert. Gloria laughed quietly. Without question. Across the plaza, Ryan stood near the black sedan waiting at the curb. Snowflakes landed against the shoulders of his dark coat, while his driver held the rear passenger door open patiently. But Ryan had not gotten inside yet. He remained watching the buses instead, watching the children, watching the life returning to something he once abandoned. Emily noticed how different he looked now compared to the man who first walked into Whitmore Grill during the snowstorm. Still elegant, still composed, but less distant somehow, like warmth had finally found small cracks through the ice. Go talk to him, Gloria murmured softly. Emily blinked. What? Gloria smiled knowingly. That man spent 15 years avoiding music because grief terrified him. She looked toward Ryan carefully. Tonight he stayed. Emily looked down briefly, suddenly unsure why her heartbeat had changed. I do not think he needs me standing there making emotional speeches. Good. Gloria adjusted her gloves. Because your mother never believed in speeches either. Emily laughed softly beneath her breath before finally walking across the snowy plaza toward Ryan. He noticed her immediately. Somehow he always seemed to. Everyone made it onto the buses alive, she said gently as she stopped beside him. Ryan nodded once. An impressive achievement considering Mason nearly climbed onto the orchestra stage afterward. Emily smiled. He says he was inspired. I believe him. Snow drifted quietly between them while traffic lights blurred against wet streets nearby. Ryan looked toward the fountain for a moment before speaking again. Thank you. Emily frowned slightly. For what? For making me come tonight. His voice remained calm, but she could hear the honesty beneath it now. I almost canceled 3 times. Why? Ryan gave a tired breath that turned white in the freezing air. Because I was afraid music would still hurt. Emily studied him quietly. Did it? Ryan looked at her then. Really looked at her. Yes. Her expression softened slightly. Ryan continued more quietly. But not in the same way anymore. Silence settled gently around them. The kind silence that no longer felt empty. Emily pulled her coat tighter against the cold while snow gathered softly in her blonde hair. Ryan noticed immediately. You are freezing. I work night shifts in Manhattan. She smiled faintly. This barely qualifies. Ryan shook his head slightly before removing his scarf and holding it out toward her. Emily blinked. Ryan, you do not have to. Take it. His voice softened almost immediately afterward. Please. Emily accepted the scarf slowly. It still carried warmth from his coat. Something about that simple detail made her chest tighten unexpectedly. Thank you, she whispered. Ryan glanced toward the buses again. Daniel used to do that too. What? Give away his scarf every winter. A small sad smile touched his mouth. He was constantly cold because of treatments, but somehow always worried about everyone else first. Emily wrapped the scarf carefully around her neck. Your brother sounds a lot like you. Ryan looked genuinely surprised by the statement. I think you are the only person who has ever said that. Maybe because most people only know the Billionaire version. A quiet laugh escaped him. Real this time. And what version do you know? Emily thought about the question carefully before answering. The exhausted one. Ryan lowered his eyes briefly at that. Not offended. Understood. The plaza lights reflected softly against falling snow, while the final bus slowly pulled away from the curb, carrying children still singing orchestra melodies badly through the windows. Ryan watched until the taillights disappeared completely into Manhattan traffic. Daniel would have loved them, he murmured softly. Emily stepped beside him quietly. I think they would have loved him too. Ryan looked down for a moment as if trying to steady something emotional inside himself. Then finally he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a small object wrapped carefully in dark cloth. There is something I want to show you. Emily accepted it gently. Inside rested an old silver music box scratched slightly with age. Tiny engraved notes curved across the lid. Daniel carried this everywhere during treatments, Ryan explained quietly. Emily opened it carefully. Soft piano notes immediately floated into the winter air. The melody, the same one. Delicate, fragile, beautiful. Emily's eyes widened slightly. This is where I heard it before. Ryan nodded slowly. Your mother used to play it for him when he could not sleep. Snow continued falling around them, while the music box played softly between their hands beneath Manhattan lights. For a moment the city itself seemed quieter somehow. Less hurried, less cold. Ryan, Emily asked gently after a long silence. Why are you showing me this now? He looked at her carefully. Vulnerably, like a man no longer hiding behind wealth or titles. Because I think Daniel trusted your mother with the parts of himself he was afraid to lose. His gray eyes softened slightly. And somehow, after all these years, hearing you hum that song made me feel like maybe those parts survived. Emily looked down at the tiny music box resting in her palms, while warm notes drifted softly into the snow-covered night. Then she realized something quietly heartbreaking. Ryan Whitmore had spent 15 years trying to protect himself from grief. But all along, what he truly missed was not the pain. It was the music. Spring arrived quietly in Manhattan that year. Snow disappeared from sidewalks. Trees near Central Park slowly turned green again. And for the first time in nearly a decade, music returned permanently to Madison Arts House. Children filled the hallways every afternoon now. Real classes, real instruments. Real heat flowing through repaired walls instead of winter air slipping through broken windows. The old building no longer looked forgotten. It looked alive. Above the entrance doors, a new bronze plaque had been installed beneath warm lantern lights. Whitmore Community Arts House. But underneath the official name, engraved in smaller letters, sat another sentence few people noticed at first glance. For the quiet people who keep songs alive. Emily stood beneath the sign one warm April evening while parents arrived to pick up children after rehearsal. Somewhere upstairs, Mason practiced violin with enough confidence now to sound almost good. Ava played beginner piano scales beside the recital room window, while Gloria corrected posture with loving strictness only true music teachers possessed. Life moved gently through the building again. Emily smiled softly to herself while carrying paper cups of hot chocolate toward the front desk. Miss Emily. Mason nearly crashed into her in excitement. Mr. Whitmore is here. Her heartbeat reacted before her expression did. Ryan had been visiting the center almost every week now, though never for attention. Sometimes he repaired broken chairs with maintenance workers. Sometimes he sat quietly during rehearsals pretending not to cry during emotional performances. Sometimes he brought sandwiches for exhausted teachers and acted confused whenever anyone thanked him too much. He still wore expensive coats. Still took important phone calls about billion-dollar mergers. But the children no longer saw him as a billionaire. To them, he was simply Ryan, the quiet man who always stayed for piano recitals. Emily stepped into the recital hall and immediately spotted him near the back row. He sat alone in shirt sleeves with his suit jacket folded neatly beside him, reviewing sheet music Mason had proudly handed him earlier. Warm evening lights spilled across the wooden stage, while soft piano notes drifted through the room. Ryan looked up the moment Emily entered. Somehow he always noticed her instantly, no matter how crowded a room became. You missed dinner again, she said gently while handing him one of the hot chocolates. Ryan accepted it with a faint guilty smile. I was in meetings. That is billionaire language for yes. He laughed quietly beneath his breath. The sound still surprised her sometimes. Ryan Whitmore had one of those rare smiles that transformed his entire face when it appeared honestly. Less intimidating. Less lonely. How was rehearsal? He asked. Emily sat beside him slowly. Mason nearly started a violin rebellion because Gloria would not let him play jazz during Mozart. Ryan nodded seriously. Reasonable protest. Emily smiled. You are encouraging chaos. I am encouraging artistic freedom. Their shoulders brushed lightly when she laughed. Small contact. Brief. But neither of them moved away afterward. On stage, Ava carefully practiced scales while Gloria corrected finger placement patiently beneath warm recital lights. Ryan watched quietly for a moment before speaking again. I found something. Emily looked toward him curiously. Ryan reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a folded envelope worn carefully with age. One of Daniel's old storage boxes was delivered to my apartment last week. His voice softened slightly. This was inside. Emily opened the envelope carefully. Inside rested a photograph faded around the corners from time. A hospital piano room. Daniel Whitmore smiling weakly beside the old, upright piano. Olivia Carter kneeling beside him with hot chocolate cups balanced in both hands. And near the corner of the picture, a little blonde girl no older than 8 sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening quietly. Emily stared silently. That is me. Ryan nodded once. Daniel took the photo himself. Her fingers trembled slightly against the edge of the picture. I do not remember this day. I do. Ryan looked toward the stage lights while speaking softly. Daniel was having a difficult week. Olivia brought you with her because she thought hearing children laugh would cheer him up. Emily studied the photograph carefully. Tiny details. Her old sneakers. Her mother's scarf. Daniel's fragile smile somehow still warm despite everything. He wrote something on the back, Ryan said quietly. Emily turned the picture over slowly. Handwritten words covered the faded paper in uneven ink. If Ryan ever forgets happy things, remind him music still exists. Emily closed her eyes briefly at the sentence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The recital hall filled softly with beginner piano notes drifting through warm spring light. Finally, Ryan looked toward her again. I spent 15 years thinking grief meant holding on to pain. His voice remained calm, but emotional honesty rested openly beneath every word now. But your mother understood something I did not. Emily lowered the photograph carefully into her lap. What is that? Ryan's gray eyes softened. The people we lose are not honored by silence. Emily felt tears sting unexpectedly behind her eyes. Not dramatic tears. Quiet ones. The kind that arrive gently when truth finally lands somewhere deep enough to matter. On stage, Ava finished her practice piece and immediately looked toward the audience for approval. Ryan stood first to applaud, loud enough that the little girl burst into proud laughter. Soon everyone else joined in. Gloria smiled warmly from beside the piano while children waiting backstage peeked around curtains excitedly. Ryan remained standing there clapping softly beneath golden recital lights, while Emily watched him carefully. The billionaire who once avoided music now looked completely at home inside it. And suddenly she understood something too. Ryan Whitmore had not really been saved by money, success, or time. He had been saved by a song quietly carried forward through kindness. A melody surviving inside ordinary people long after grief tried to silence it. Ryan sat beside her again after the applause faded. What? He asked softly after noticing her expression. Emily smiled through quiet tears. Nothing. She looked toward the children filling the stage with noise and life and terrible beginner music. Then back toward the man sitting beside her no longer afraid to listen. I just think your brother would be very proud of you right now. Ryan lowered his gaze briefly after hearing that. Then slowly, quietly, honestly, he smiled.